Today, I am so pleased on the heels of the G20 summit to be rejoined on the program by the official spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian Embassy in Washington, D.C., Fahad Nazer, particularly because the kingdom held the presidency for the first time at this year's G20 summit. Fahad, welcome back to the show, sir. It's so good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on again, Jimmy.
Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Let me just ask a broad question. How did the G20 presidency opportunity come about, and what does it mean for the kingdom that this chance happened and did it over this course of this last weekend?
Right, so the G20 is an important organization that includes the world's top economies. It also represents about 70% of the world population. So Saudi Arabia was the president of the organization for the year 2020. And in our capacity as president, we actually ended up organizing not just one, but two virtual summits. The first one was back in March to galvanize the international community and galvanize it and bring its attention to dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, which was really breaking out all over the world at that point. I think we've made a lot of strides since then, as is evidenced by the fact that we now have much more effective vaccines and but also therapeutics and more accurate diagnostics. This was back in March, and we held the leadership summit back just this past weekend. And again, the summit dealt with the impact of the COVID-19 from multiple angles. We obviously looked at the public health impact of COVID-19, but we've also, or the organization rather, looked into and implemented concrete measures to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 on the global economy. So some of the member nations took some measures to make sure that some of the countries hardest hit, especially those, some of the lesser developed countries, have some debt relief that would help them to focus their attention on the public health aspect of the pandemic. But all in all, under very difficult circumstances, I think that Saudi Arabia held a great summit, and it was very successful.
What does it mean to the kingdom to have had the chance to do this, to actually take that presidency, hold the gavel? Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman himself oversaw this meeting, I believe. And I mean, there is some historical significance to that. What does it mean to the kingdom?
Well, the meetings were actually overseen by His Majesty King Salman, who delivered the opening remarks and also closed or adjourned the meeting. But His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman also spoke at the meeting.
Thank you.
So this was an important. Yeah, no worries. So this was an important occasion for us. Saudi Arabia realizes that it has an important role to play, certainly in the Middle East. It is the only Middle Eastern country that is represented at the G20. It is the only Arab majority nation at the G20. So in that capacity, we realized that we had an opportunity and perhaps a responsibility to bring the world's attention to deal with this pandemic, the likes of which we have not seen in the past 100 years. And I think in addition to the measures we took internally in the kingdom to make sure that the pandemic does not spread, I think we made good use of this important forum to galvanize the international community's effort towards mitigating the impact of COVID-19, looking at multiple angles of it, not just the public health crisis and impact, but also the impact of the global economy.
It is so important to really understand the nature of the U.S. Saudi relationship, especially given the regional dynamics. You mentioned Iran. Certainly the current presidential administration of President Trump understands the threat that Iran poses to the United States, to the Middle East, to the world. Hence, the U.S., under his leadership, withdrew from the Iranian nuclear deal. Earlier this week, there was a meeting in Saudi Arabia that included President Trump's Secretary of State, that would be Mike Pompeo, as well as Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Media reports say that the Israeli Prime Minister was there as well. Of course, the Saudi Arabian, the kingdom denies that that took place, but I'm curious what the significance is, at least of the meeting between Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Secretary Pompeo this week, and what that can tell us about the current state of U.S. Saudi relations.
Well, I think I've mentioned in my previous appearances that Saudi US relations commemorated or marked their 75th anniversary back in February. This was the marking of the legendary meeting between the founder of modern day Saudi Arabia, King Abdulaziz Al Saud, and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt aboard the USS Quincy in the Great Bitter Lake in the Suez Canal back in 1945. And since then, in those 75 years, the relationship has really continued to grow and to deepen and to broaden under both Democratic and Republican administrations. In fact, just last month, Saudi Arabia and the United States launched what is known as the strategic dialogue between the two countries. We had a big delegation here in Washington, D.C., headed by His Highness Prince Faisal Al Farhan, Saudi Arabia's foreign minister. The two countries discussed a host of issues that really underscore the multi-dimensional institutional nature of the relationship. So they spoke about defense cooperation to deter common threats. They spoke about intelligence cooperation, which I and others have argued has saved the lives of thousands of both Saudis and Americans over the years. They talked about enhancing and promoting stable energy markets. And Secretary Pompeo's recent visit was a continuation of discussions on all of these important fronts.
Now, it does look here in the United States likely that Joe Biden will become the next president of the United States come January, although there are still some legal challenges that are going through the court process. Former Vice President Biden has a very different view about the Iranian nuclear deal. He is on the record as saying that he would like to restore the Iranian nuclear deal. We have seen Arabic countries really come together, and some Arabic countries come together along with the state of Israel in order to really gather up support against Iran, coming together, uniting against this common threat. And I wonder to what extent that may have come up in this meeting as far as the Iranian nuclear deal and the shift that we're seeing, the geopolitical shift in the Middle East right now, when we had this meeting earlier in the week, Fahad Nazer.
Right. So as I said, the relationship has continued to grow and to strengthen under both Democratic and Republican administrations going back 75 years. Saudi Arabia obviously knows Vice President Biden very well from his many years in the Senate and his 8 years as Vice President in the Obama administration. We fully anticipate that we will continue to have a very productive and very positive relationship with the United States under a possible Joe Biden administration, due to the fact that, as I enumerated earlier in the discussion, that the relationship really has multi-dimensions that we and others have argued advance the national interests of both countries. I think the relationship has been not only good for both Saudi Arabia and the United States, I would argue that it has been good for promoting peace and stability and prosperity in the region, for sure, but also more broadly around the world, as is evidenced by the example I just mentioned about U.S. Saudi cooperation on providing humanitarian relief to Bangladesh.
Just a couple minutes with our guest, Fahad Nazer from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's embassy in Washington, D.C. In terms of the nature of the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia, I think that there are so many different issues, as you have discussed, that we have seen the U.S. and Saudi Arabia and the kingdom align on. And this Iranian nuclear deal and the threat that Iran poses clearly has, over the course of the last 4 or so years, been one of those significant alignments. I mean, you look at President Trump's visit to Riyadh, capital of Saudi Arabia, in 2017, just a few months after taking office. I think he really wanted to show support for the Arab countries, support for trying to bring us all together behind combating this common threat. And I wonder if there's concern in the kingdom right now about the possibility that the United States may realign with the Iranian nuclear deal.
So on the JCPOA, as it is commonly known, I mean, ultimately we did support it, but we did have serious reservations and concerns regarding several issues. One was the sunset clauses that essentially turned the agreement into a temporary halt in Iran's nuclear program. Obviously, we don't want that. We want it to be a permanent. We also had concerns about the fact that the agreement did not address Iran's ballistic missile program, which is tied to certainly tied to its nuclear file. And just as importantly, we had and continue to have grave concerns about the fact that the agreement did not address Iran's malign behavior in the region going back 40 years. So, as you know, Jimmy, very well, Iran has sought to destabilize the region going back 40 years since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. It has basically violated every law, norm, and convention of the international community. It has supported militant groups in countries all over the region, for sure, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, and has supported terrorist organizations and actual terrorist operations in places as varied as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Argentina, France, Germany, and even here in the United States when they tried to assassinate Saudi Arabia's own ambassador in Washington, D.C. some 10 years ago. So we do have concerns, obviously. As you correctly said, Saudi Arabia and the United States are in complete alignment over Iran and the danger that it presents to the stability and the peace of the region. And we suspect and we fully anticipate that the incoming administration, there are certainly signs that they're well aware and appreciate these dangers, the danger that Iran poses. And I hope that, in case there is a renegotiated agreement, that all of these concerns that are they're not only Saudi Arabia's concerns, but they are concerns shared by many of our neighbors, that they will be addressed.
I certainly hope so as well. I think it would be a grave mistake for the United States to return to the JCPOA, or the Iranian nuclear deal, as we often call it.